Welcome to the Valhalla Filmcast, a show where normal guys talk about the films that they love. And here are your hosts, Bryce Thompson, Brian Hammond, and Cody Ryrie. Now get ready, because the show starts in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Valhalla Filmcast. I am Bryce Thompson, and I am here with our special guest, Batman, Cody Ryrie. If he talked and he just didn't sit there.
I was really confused. No, I've got a cold or something. And
yeah, now I'm jealous I don't have a nickname.
Also, Brian Hammond.
Hello.
And we have a special edition, even more so than Batman over here. Brian.
Yes, Jason Razzle, say hi.
Hello.
He's one of my friends, my movie buddy.
So we brought him on. We have just seen the...
There's no the. It's just Hacksaw Ridge.
Well, no, I was going to say like the amazing, the incredible. But there's actually... I don't know. It's just... My brain has been... I feel like I was on Hacksaw Ridge and my brain just got splattered. Because it was so amazing and intense.
Before we dive straight in, you should talk about what it is. Give people a background a little bit. Yeah.
We have seen Hacksaw Ridge, and it is a movie about Desmond Doss. Good correction. He was a conscientious... I can't say that word.
Conscientious objection.
Thank you. And he fought in World War II. He was a medic, and he was in the Pacific side of the war. And this is his story, and it is definitely an intense one. It has Mel Gibson all over it. When I was watching this movie, I kept thinking, like, I don't know if I can rewatch this movie.
Yeah.
Like, this, like, as I was watching it, and, like, there's one part... This is total spoilers. Like,
Go for it. Why not?
Total spoilers.
Right.
But there's a part... And, I mean, even if there's not really much spoilers in it, like...
It's a war
Just go
film,
watch
so.
it. Just go watch it. But... There's, like, this one part when he's coming up rescuing everyone, and I'm like, this movie has, like, totally, like, changed my life. Like, because I can probably never rewatch this movie, but then I need to show it to everyone that I've ever met, but I can't rewatch it because it's so intense. Like, you literally have every single, like, movie in it. Like, you have, like, it's, like, super funny at times.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
A lot of that from Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
And then...
Great performance.
Yeah. Very intense war scenes. And then, like, the biggest jump scare I think I've ever
I noticed
witnessed.
that you jumped really bad. Sitting next to me.
Dude,
It didn't get me, but it got you. So
it just, like, totally.
Scary Japanese people. Yeah.
Oh, man, that was very scary. I might have nightmares.
It's a new kind of Japanese horror. So, yeah.
But, I mean, it's a movie that you have to experience in theaters. I don't think it gets the same message across, and I feel like some of the violence could be kind of lost. Some of, like, the war scenes could be lost on just the normal viewing at home. Because you don't have the the intensity is on the screen with the sound of the theater, that it's one that I would definitely recommend seeing.
There was, I guess, yeah, we'll just talk about our experiences with it, then we can get into details. But there was one moment when, I don't know why, but, like, it was just almost too much for me, the whole battle scene. And I was like, I'm going to have to go, like, splash water on my face, like, outside. Like,
yeah, for reals.
I started to feel kind of dizzy almost. Like, it was... And that's not a criticism. That's...
No, it...
Well, it's funny because I heard some guy say on the radio, he's like, you've seen Saving Private Ryan? And I was thinking, yeah. And he's like, okay, this is so much worse than Saving Private Ryan. I was like, come on.
1,000,000,000 times.
Give me a break, And Saving Private Ryan is still an awesome, incredibly
definitely
well-made movie. But there is something so foreboding and so... I think the violence was worse than Saving Private Ryan. In fact, I'm honestly surprised that it got an R, and they didn't push to NC-17 in some ways, because it's not just gore; it's realistic gore.
No, it makes when we were watching it, I was my stomach was getting upset.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, I felt a little nauseous.
You're this is intense.
And I'm a lightweight. I am a lightweight. I will say that. That's not my thing. But I've never seen bullets hit people like they do in this movie either.
Many bullets.
You can just feel the impact of them. I don't know if it's the sound or what. The sound was incredible too, by the way.
It was. Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Jason, you're the guest. Your thoughts? Initial thoughts?
Well, I don't know about initial thoughts, but what you were saying made me think that this was a different kind of intense for me. It's something that has been scratched at by a few other war movies that I've seen in recent years. American Sniper comes to mind.
Yeah, I thought of that too.
Saving Private Ryan definitely had a little bit of that effect when I first saw it, but this is an emotional intensity brought on by the carnage of warfare. You're invested in the characters. They did great character development early off in the movie, and you kind of just you can imagine a background behind every soldier. You can imagine that there are families at home wondering what's become of them. It all comes together when they get up on the ridge.
So they're not just faceless cannon fodder. They're And I don't know exactly how. And I think you bring up a good point that the first, I don't know, I didn't time it, but I'd say over the first half of the movie is not in combat.
No.
Yeah.
It's building character. You're meeting him and his future wife and his family dynamic and all that. I think some people might be a little, what's the word? Impatient with that. I wasn't. I thought it was really good, but it really pays off. Like Jason was saying, when you get up on the ridge, because he's a real person, you really care about him, and by extension, the people around him. So you have to invest that time in.
It did push the pacing limits at the beginning. I mean, not for me. I can see how some people that would go into that based on the trailers and stuff might be, let's get to the action, you know what I mean? So I do see your point of view on that.
And I think that if you do, they can't add any more. If it's any longer, people are
intolerable.
Just about long.
Yeah, people are having issues. I couldn't. I was thinking, how can any person who's ever served and had combat experience, how could they just watch that? And I was thinking, there's no World War II veterans watching this movie because they've all passed away. But any other veteran that has had
I think we had two in the audience tonight.
You think so?
One to the left of me and one to the right. Yeah, they were making real-time comments.
I'm a sissy.
I was gonna say,
because
I've got PTSD after watching the movie. Yeah,
it's just it's so intense. It's such the action is placed well. I think if you are getting impatient, remind yourself that it's coming and that it's gonna rock your face off.
Well, and can I say this? It reminded me of a horror film. I really got that vibe from it. It was scary, and it's not something you're all right, let's get to the action. Yeah, no. You're no, suck, get out of there. Get out of there, it was nothing glorious about it. There was nothing, it was really, really well done, but it was terrifying. And it really, Francois Truffaut, they had that famous quote that you can't ever do an anti-war film because if you put anything on film, it glorifies it. Well, I thought Saving Private Ryan was a pretty good rebuttal, and this has killed that.
Oh, yeah. This is definitely...
I never want to go.
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
I don't want my kids to go.
No.
Exactly.
No.
And this is... Saving Private Ryan, they say that that's the most realistic war movie, which I haven't watched it for a while, but I have to say this one just demolishes that. And I think it's like a good thing, but then is it?
Well, it's a different kind of movie, a little bit, but
like in the sense of like, it's, I don't want to like say like, oh, we don't want our children to see all these bad things, but like that, it's so intense. Like like you feel like anything could happen. I think that's why when you see when he's having his dream, like you're so sucked into the movie. You're like there, and then you see these guys, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Well, can we talk about the treatment of the Japanese in the film for a minute?
Yeah.
Too, I thought that was interesting. You see the Japanese mostly from the point of view of the American soldiers, and they're. I don't want to. This is how I perceived it while watching the film. I'm not saying that Japanese people are really like this or anything like that, but in the film they are very frightening. Machine, can't stop them. There's one part where a guy pulls a grenade and grabs another guy and won't let him go until they both get blown up.
That's all real.
Yeah, I know.
That's
Yeah,
Japanese, they're heard too.
Yeah, they're intense with kamikaze pilots, and I mean their pride and honor is, no one's second to them.
Yeah, I'll agree.
Did I say that right?
No one's second to them.
Yes,
I think you're good.
Okay. Yeah, because their honor and pride that they have. I mean, this is kind of a spoiler, but there's a scene later on in the film that's probably the only point from a Japanese perspective.
Yes, yeah.
That kind of shines that to light of just how much pride and honor, play a part in their whole culture. And so, anyways, yeah.
Well, yeah, I would like to talk about that actually, just because you think that scene. Spoilers, just so it's easier to talk about, is scene of one of the leaders of the Japanese army committing suicide. He's taking, well, I guess, yeah, pretty much. He's kind of like, he failed in a way, and that seeing that, it's not like, oh man, what a coward, what a sissy. But then like you think, like you hear about on the other side in Europe, you hear like Hitler when he died. You're like, oh man, it's not as glorious.
Well, Mel Gibson portrays that suicide very, I don't know, what's the word?
Honorable.
Yeah, it's
almost honorable.
It's not shown. Yeah. It's it's lit from one single light source and slow motion and has the music behind it. And interesting that he crosses that with Doss, leaving the battlefield and getting his Bible back, and it's almost like the power of belief in two different ends that come to people when they really believe something really strongly. I don't know. I have to think about it, I guess. But it didn't come to me across that Mel Gibson was criticizing.
No, he was trying. It was like a respectful. This is the culture. This is the way they do things. This is. It wasn't like, oh look,
it felt like a very positive treatment of their culture and how that plays out on the battlefield.
Yeah. Because, I mean, that's like like samurais. Like, if you go back to, like, ancient samurai history, that's what they did.
Yeah.
And the blade only, if, like, you drew your blade, it had to draw blood. Mm-hmm. And that's what it was for. And you can tell, like, when he opens the container, it's all wrapped up. And, like, it's meant, for that. And even before that, you can see they're doing, like, some ceremonial, like, thing where they're drinking something. I don't know what.
Sake, probably.
Yeah. And like it's not like, oh, this is a panic thing, it's very like thought out. This is what we do now, and it was very. I wouldn't say that they were, disrespected.
It didn't feel like a hatchet job to me. They were really scary though. Oh yeah, like they were terrifying in the movie.
The infantry, the Japanese infantry. It was not like they were mindless monsters. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that type of intimidation. It was, dang, I don't ever want to come up against these guys on the battlefield.
Yes.
There was some real brutality. Yeah. There was some real brutality from them. No survivors left behind and a fake surrender, and things like that. But,
and I think all of this is, like, just from, like, stories that I've heard and, history that I've, like, read about. It's all very accurate. They're very intense. It's either like we die. We don't just like give up. You know, that's not in them. Like, there's a story of somewhere where instead of, you know, surrendering, they all just like jumped off the cliff.
Yeah.
Instead. And like, I think that's very well portrayed, you know, in this movie. And I can only give it, you know, praises, really.
There has to be also, like, if you put yourself in the shoes of the Japanese, being on the homeland, you know what I mean? Like, that's a different perspective as well. You're not the visitor. That's your land. You know, and so the only thing I thought of, I don't mean to make light of the whole movie or anything, but like, couldn't they have cut the rope ladder and the whole movie?
Well, I thought of that, but I think they wanted him to come up. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
that's what I arrived at.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as we got
like
past the first wave of battle, I'm like, okay, so why is this rope ladder even up here? But then I kept watching, and it really seemed like the Japanese were just excited that there were fresh waves of adversaries coming at them.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Can we talk about the beginning part of the movie? Because we haven't really focused on that at all.
Yeah, let's...
Yeah, I want to bring out, for me, the big standout at the beginning of the film was Hugo Weaving, who plays Desmond Doss's father in the film. And we should say that Andrew Garfield plays Desmond Doss, and I'll talk about him in a second. But his father is a World War I veteran and does not have a positive view of war. After this, tries to get his sons not to do it. He's an alcoholic. I love the fact that he was not portrayed in a one-dimensional fashion. I mean, was he a negative figure in some ways? Yes, he was abusive, he was an alcoholic, and yet when it came down to it, he came through for his son. You know, it's a complex relationship.
Definitely. And, I mean, if you think about it, like, just go through what, you know, going through Hacksaw Ridge, just that first little battle, and then transport yourself back to humans, you know, human life, you know, being a normal citizen. It's a wonder, you know, that he has, and all his friends, the guys that he enlisted with, they're all dead. You know, like, before you're like, oh man, this guy's, you know, rough. Like, he's rough. Like, he even says, like, that, oh, they're as crazy as their dad. But then you're like, okay, well, now it's kind of understandable why he is this way.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because I think, and it's interesting to think about it from this perspective of Mel Gibson dealing with those alcoholism
That's
issues.
true. That's true.
I mean, you've got him kind of, you sympathize with him at certain levels. Like you said, it's not two-dimensional. There's different facets to his character, and you do sympathize with him at certain points, but at other points he's a monster, and you despise him. And I can only think that, you know, Mel Gibson's own persona kind of, or his past
some
experience.
self-loathing,
Yeah.
Well, I do want to bring up Andrew Garfield's performance. Andrew Garfield, for, you know, those of you who haven't seen a lot of movies, he's a younger guy. He was in Spider-Man. He played Spider-Man a couple times.
The Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, didn't end super well. Was in Social Network, and now I think the thing that works about him is he seems to have a level of sincerity that he can get across that's not mocking. You know, because this character is very religious and very, you know, holding to his beliefs, and I think that could come across in a very, I don't know, cynical way if you weren't careful, or arch, or whatever. But he can play things so straight down the line and make you believe it. He's the linchpin in the movie, and I think he holds it together. I thought he did a great job. So,
It was a different time period back then, and I think he nailed it perfectly. Kind of at sometimes it was a little sugary and, you know, syrupy or whatever you want to call it, but I think that is true to form, you know, for that time period and for his character in particular and his development as a person, probably. So
Yeah.
I would say my only thing that I would say would be a negative, which kind of turns not too much of a negative, but as I was watching the movie, when they first get to basic training, Vince Vaughn comes in and he just like makes a mess of everything. And, you know, he's being funny and, you know, he's making you laugh. But I was like, I don't know if I like this. Like, it felt like almost too much. But then, as I think about it, I'm kind of glad for that. Because it kind of, you go through something that's so intense, and then you can kind of fall back on that. And you can kind of be like, okay, I need to like back up, like, let me out of this. And then you can go back and have that comedic relief, I guess. And it makes it works. Like, this whole movie just works so well. Yeah. Like, when I thought that it was going to be not very, like, I was like, really, Vince Vaughn? Like, he's just some goofy guy, you know, but he does well in helping you to, I guess, get through it. And that's the only thing I can really think of is, because it's intense, but that the beginning of the movie it's so essential, you know, to helping you get through, you know, the very end part, because you have to believe what this guy is doing. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to believe that what he's doing and that he really believes it. You know, you kind of, it's almost like you're one of his guys in his troop, you know, like you're going along with him and you're like, okay, this guy's supposed to like save my life. And then you have to like fall and believe him that he will save you as well. You know, they kind of make you, you know, part of it, and you have to believe him as well, I think. Nice. And I think, you know, Mel Gibson, you know, did a great job. You know,
he's a savage with his camera and his directing
and with his makeup department.
Yes.
Well, can I say this? You know, there's another quote I heard, that an artist paints the same tree his whole life, and that filmmakers make similar movies. You know, there are a lot of similarities between this film and Braveheart, and even Apocalypto, and even The Passion of the Christ. Actually, you know, there's a lot of there's a line in Braveheart that's uncompromising men are easy to admire, and I think that Mel Gibson is drawn to people who are totally uncompromising, who have a set of beliefs, and they refuse, no matter what, to give it up. And that applies to Christ and The Passion of the Christ. It applies to, you know, William Wallace and Braveheart, and it definitely applies to Desmond Doss and Hacksaw Ridge. These people that will go through anything, you know, to uphold their set of beliefs and their values. And by doing that, they impact the people around them to a profound degree. Those are the stories he loves to tell. And I think that, you know, this is as good as any of those movies before. Harder to watch than those other movies. Even Passion of the Christ. This was harder to watch for me than Passion of the Christ. So,
we've talked about, or you've brought this up, but I just wanted to equate this with like the last movie I had that had like that pit in the stomach just from the intense realism of the gore that was happening was Evil Dead. And I don't want to put them in the same character because Evil Dead does not have the same gravitas as a Mel Gibson film, you know what I'm saying? But like, that's amazing that he can take that realism and that, you know, that I don't know what else to call it besides gore. Like,
it is.
It is.
And it was so real. I mean, entrails, everything, just it was intense.
Varying degrees of environmental, you know, contact as well. Some of the bodies were like so fresh they were juicy. And other bodies had been rubbed in the dirt for a good long while.
There was even with maggots and
that battle had been happening on Hacksaw Ridge for a while, it appeared.
It was very, like I said, and it was done very realistically, but it's very much horror film kind of stuff, but it had so much more impact. Because sometimes a horror film, the gore's kind of, what's the word? It's more of like for fun in a weird way. There's nothing fun about the gore.
No.
Well, that makes me think about when we were talking about Hateful Eight, and how if you listened, that we think that it's not Del Toro, Tarantino, Tarantino, you know, making us look at ourselves, you know, because all his movies, you know, he's, you know, gore all the time, but I think that this is, you know, completely different. You know, it serves a purpose 100%. Like, you could argue that the other movies, it serves a purpose, but this no doubt serves a purpose. And Another thing that I was thinking about the entire time is just the psychological, effects that this has. You've probably heard me talk about it before, but a book called On Killing, which talks about, the psychological effects that killing has on a person's brain. And it's a fabulous book. I recommend everybody read it. But I was just thinking about that the whole time, like what their brains, are doing.
Yeah.
And he does. That's another thing that I really liked. It's not just, them going to war. Okay, now they're done. You can see just from like the father, like we talked about before, he has, psychological issues, that he needs help to get through. But it's not well known back in those times, and so he doesn't get help, and you can see the issues that have come from it. And it's just, I think that there's so many different levels in this movie, just so many different things that you could talk about. I mean, we could probably talk about this movie for probably 3 hours, just in all the different things and go into detail about everything. But that was the one thing that really stuck out to me, was just, the psychological effects that this has to have on Desmond. And they have like an interview with him afterwards, and he just seems just like a
cheerful old guy. Yeah.
That was interesting. It almost felt like a documentary. Sorry.
No, you're good.
When it went on for longer than I expected it to.
Yeah, it's been done before, the whole pictures with the subtitles and stuff. But, I mean, this was almost like a mini doc at the end of the film.
Which was really good.
Which was interesting. It was great. And, I loved it.
And, I mean, I might go all over the place, but it kind of shows you that, there's people who are out there that, are meant... it's almost like it's really cheesy, but that's okay, because, it's like he was meant to go and do that. And like he had this purpose to go and to, be this hero for all of these different people. And that jumping, but I thought it was really, really neat when he's getting lowered down, like every one of those guys up there had been saved by him. And like they all owed their lives, to him, which was just, it was a really cool scene, seeing him get lifted down, and they're all standing there. It was like he was floating
in the air, like
that was
almost
really
like
cool.
An angel or something. It was really, really neat visual.
And he'd earned it by that point.
Yeah, more. So.
It didn't come across as like what, or by that point you're totally on board.
Yeah, yes.
I will say that halfway through the battle scene, I was like, really, is this all he's going to do? It wasn't until he got left up there that the miracles started happening. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, really? I hope this isn't it. I'm glad that there was more to that, but I kind of was let down at first, and then definitely fulfilled at the end.
The
amount of lives he saved.
Well, just because that first initial battle scene, you're like, dude, this is wow, and then you're like, oh my gosh, get off. Just calm down. Like, let's go.
No, one more.
Yeah, it's so amazing. And I think what really just that, like we said, the like mini documentary, at the end, it kind of really ties it together. Because you actually hear the stories that they put in the movie, and that you're like, okay, this isn't just some thing that Mel Gibson thought of and like took some story about some guy that like rescued a couple people. No. He's actually, you're listening to him talk, and he tells the story, and you're like, okay, I believe.
And the people he saved, the witnesses.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing, I heard Mel Gibson give an interview where they'd asked him, so what did you change from the real story? And he said, well, we did change some things. He said there was a couple things that he did that we knew no one would believe.
Yes.
So he said, like, because when he was actually being carried out when he was wounded, what he actually did is he saw somebody else who was wounded, hopped off the stretcher, patched that guy up, gave the stretcher to him, crawled to the edge of the cliff, got shot a couple more times, and then went down the rope and
which is
got carried out.
Amazing, but you're right.
But he thought nobody will buy it.
Yeah.
And so the inaccuracies in the movie are not expounding or making up things, it's having to shave off reality.
That's interesting.
That's just like The Revenant.
Yeah.
We talked after that one about how incredible that was, and okay, they must have embellished it a little bit, but
they just
it was more like they watered it down to make it more credible.
Bryce was the Hugh Glass man on that, and he let me on to that information. I did some research. It was amazing.
It's even more crazy.
Yeah.
You're like, this story's insane.
I know. And I would not have believed it if it had been on film.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could go into that story we won't. But, those are the stories that are so interesting when they kind of like cut back. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, this can't really, be happening. Oh, well, actually, we cut this out because he actually did this, but you wouldn't believe it. And you just kind of...
Yeah, you're right. I wouldn't.
The old saying is true that truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
I see that over and over and over again.
I have to give mad props for this one because there have been many films I've seen where there were specific subtle details that impressed me. But I was impressed with the result, how it all came together of the subtle details, especially in the battle scenes for this one. I was like flinching and dodging chunks of shrapnel as, stuff was blowing up. And when that first battle scene was over, I wanted to brush the dirt off of it. This was no Michael Bay, fireball after fireball type action sequence. It was, it was compression explosions and waves of dirt and rock.
Feel it.
Yeah.
You could feel it.
There's one time when, I don't know if it was after the night, the lull, but the first gunshot, the first bullet after some lull, it sounded like it was right behind me. It scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, I probably might have nightmares from his dream sequence. I'm not even. It was that was so terrifying. Yeah. Because his worst nightmare. And what everyone is saying, oh, this is going to happen to you. You're not going to be able to defend yourself. And then he has a nightmare about it. And it happens. And you're like, oh, man. Yeah. What are you going to do? And then he wakes up and you're like, oh, my gosh.
Well, that's what he's feeling, too. He can't even get rest when he's asleep.
Yeah.
It's so stressful that even sleep is stressful. So, yeah.
No, this is 100%. I mean... I would like to talk to someone that didn't, enjoy it.
Just to see where they come from.
Just because I would like to know.
I'm sure it would fall on the gore side. The realism side
definitely,
is where they...
It has to. I mean, and that's the only way I think people, despise this movie.
Right? It's definitely not a first watch among war movies.
This has been decades of, I guess you could call it, digression in my movie viewing to get to this point where I could sit through it.
Yes.
If I took my son to this, no.
I've never been to a movie where I thought, I'm feeling sick.
Yes.
I'm going to have to go but I was embarrassed because we were a bunch of guys, so I stuck through it. But that's never happened to me before, It was, and I've seen a fair amount of violence and whatever else. I'm a little jaded and, man.
No, this is nowhere compared. I remember... my mom and dad said no Saving Private Ryan, and I was 10, and I was and I remember they're you can't watch this movie, and I was but I want to be in the room, and they're okay, you just can't watch the TV, and they're okay, playing it with my toys, and I remember looking up in our mirror, and I remember the guy leaning down and picking up his arm, and I was it's kind of scarred me.
Did you do the Danny from The Shining moment? You stand up and stare at the mirror,
But I remember that, and my kid will never get close to this movie because it will give
It'll traumatize them
for reals. It will, because it's so much more intense than Saving Private Ryan, and Saving Private Ryan is
it's a fantastic monumental Tower of War movies example. But something about this, I don't know. I think it's fair to say that Mel Gibson's really come roaring back after 10 years, and I just hope it keeps going. I hope this is a springboard into other stuff.
And the thought, maybe it's the battle scenes were so intense because they were so not expected.
Yeah.
Like, I did not expect this at all.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it would
because
be
you have an
just
hour of like, oh, I love you, let's get married.
Yeah.
You know, like
an hour of a Jane Austen movie or a Nicholas Sparks film.
Yeah, and any other war movie that has come, since hasn't been like this at all.
Yeah.
There's kind of been like points, like with American Sniper, the big movie recently, it didn't have like these intense, scenes like the
well, he'd go on tours and then he'd go back home
Yeah.
and things like that. Yeah,
different, also a different movie and a different type of
This
story
was really
too.
well rounded for the kind of effect it had on me. Different war movies will have a specific effect on me. The impact of American Sniper was seeing how it affects the families. Wartime is not just on the battlefield. That was the message I got out of that one.
Yeah.
This one gives me some of that. It gives me, some of the euphoria and the patriotism from other war films. It gives me the intensity and the horror that is war that Saving Private Ryan does.
it's got a little bit of everything. Yeah, yeah.
Final thoughts? Let's wrap this up.
I definitely recommend it, but with the warnings that we've given.
Yeah. If seriously, if you have been in like war, frontline stuff, you might want to
Definitely going to evoke some
so
harsh
I mean,
memories.
like, I don't want to like talking about that like makes me feel like, oh, like, what do I know?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I feel like I'm honestly like saying it like out of like respect and saying like I don't want you to like because it was like intense for me, and I know that I'm like a civilian and have never encountered anything like that, so it's going to be more intense for me. But just like I wouldn't want that to happen or like anything to come of that. So just not saying like I don't know.
So same thing. You're recommending it, but with reservations.
Oh, definitely.
Like
definitely.
warnings is a better word, I guess.
Yeah, this should be an NC-17. I think
if
any film should be, I mean, this is right up there. Seriously.
Yeah, just like I said at the beginning, I don't know if I can watch this movie again. Like
that's
I
true.
really
It's
want
amazing,
to.
but I don't know that I'd have to take a pretty big break before.
Like I really want to, but I mean, it's definitely not one I'm going to go see anytime soon again.
My final thoughts are that it's a strong, positive message.
Yes.
Yeah.
The war scenes are intense. It gives you the impression that you do not enlist, you do not undertake something like that lightly, and you give the due respect to the men and women that do serve. But everything outside of the war scenes, just strong, positive messages about family and relationships and what it means to serve.
Yeah, I think there's people that have probably seen like Unbroken. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but
yes,
that might hear about this and be like, "Oh, this might be for me," and then just be totally
scarred.
Like, walk out of the theater. Like my wife would probably not be able to sit through this. I mean, Saving Private Ryan was the movie that she said no to ours for like a decade. I'm dead serious about that. And she could. I would not take her to this or let her watch it. But it's pretty.
I mean, there's so much of me that wants to just show people this movie and be like, look at this, like it's amazing, because like you said, the messages of like when they're not even in war, talking about family and like that whole dynamic. But then even like the war, like look at
that's
this.
the exercising of all those things.
Yeah.
There's the key moment in the film is probably when spoiler when his the guy who hates him and then likes him dies, and he prays and says, what's the point of all this?
Yeah.
And then he hears the people crying for a medic. And there's that really amazing shot where it comes up over the cliff, and he's a tiny little figure, and there's explosions everywhere, and he goes off into the explosions. That is the exercising of all the religious faith and everything else. That's it in action, and I think that's the key change in the movie, because he could have become his father at that point. There was this hopelessness. It's like there's no meaning to this. This is just people dying, and instead of turning that direction, he turns the other way, and it becomes something enriching.
That's awesome, because I did not catch that on this viewing. That that's totally in his father.
That's
words.
It's happening.
It's happening
to him
in real time, and that missed me. So awesome.
Yeah, you talk about every meaning of the term character-defining moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, definitely recommend it with strong yes
disclaimers.
But I would recommend it. Watch it and let us know what you think about it. We'd love to hear. But this has been the Valhalla Filmcast. I am Bryce Thompson.
I'm Brian Hammond.
I'm Cody Ryrie.
And I am guest Jason Rousel.
And we'll talk to you next time.
The following views, opinions, and commentary are the sole property of the Valhalla Filmcast. Any unauthorized reproduction without prior consent is prohibited. Any incidental music, audio clips, or film trailers are used for the sole purpose of film criticism and commentary as allowed under the Fair Use Act.